Some of the wonders of Andalusia had already been brought into Dark Ages Europe by a Gerbert of Aurillac. He reintroduced the abacus and a spherical astrolabe that he learned of from Andalusia. He is credited with the invention of the mechanical clock. Gerbert became the first humanist pope in 999 AD. Andalusia was like the Greek Athens of its time. They had paper which helped spread literacy. They had correspondences as far as India. They traded in wool, silk, gold, silver, iron, bronze, crystals, glass, pottery, swords, textiles. They had so much wealth that they paid for hundreds of libraries which contained Arab translations of Greek mathematics and science. Andalusia and the Byzantines preserved Greek knowledge after the fall of Rome. They of course built grandiose Arabic temples, the Alhambra and the Mosque of Córdoba. The Alhambra, from the outside, the Alhambra from the inside. The Alhambra was arches and Arab art decorated to show their geometric knowledge. And, they had water fountains built inside as well. Here's the Great Mosque of Córdoba, well, a section of it. It's a forest of arches. Andalusia introduced melody and harmony into music. As noted, they inspired the troubadours. But this peaceful oasis of learning was not to last. And Alfonso VI of northern European Spain united formerly separated kingdoms. Alfonso had spent years making friends with some Andalusia rulers. When the particular political faction, which just happened to be friends with Alfonso VI, was threatened with poison over and over again, the gates to Toledo, at least, were open. Two of the first Europeans to come down to Andalusia and bring back the Arab translations, which turned out to be Greek science and mathematics, were Adelard of Bath and Pierre Abelard. Adelard of Bath found Euclid's Elements. One of his famous quotes was, "If you are led by authority, you are led by a halter." Pierre Abelard found deductive logic and applied it to 168 biblical statements. His famous quote was, "By doubting, you come to enquiry. By inquiring, we come to truth." This was a far cry from Augustine's, "Believe, and you will understand." It's one thing to find this Greek science and mathematics. But Greek science and mathematics was deductive logic axiomatics. If you don't know what deductive logic is, reading a Greek mathematics book is like reading another language. Luckily, both the Europeans and Arabs doing the translating, translated and commented on Aristotle's works which explained what deductive logic was. This wealth of both Greek and Arab science and mathematical learning flowed into France and the rest of Europe. Despite the Roman Catholic Church's best efforts to stop this flow of mathematical science learning, they brought in the Inquisition, in the form of the Dominicans in 1216, and the Franciscans in 1230, they could not. So many places like Venice and Bologna were anti-pope, because of the fighting between the West and the Byzantines during the Dark Ages, that people didn't listen to the pope much anymore. This new knowledge inspired the French cathedrals, in the 1200s. The west door of Chartres has the 7 liberal arts. Both Andalusia and the French intellectuals didn't fear the new mathematical science. But this was not to last. As indicated with the Spanish Inquisition, and the Roman Catholic Church sending in the Dominicans and Franciscans, religion is not allowed to be questioned. Thomas Aquinas tried to keep the peace by saying, there's two kinds of truth. One truth is the truth of science, the boring truths of the physical world. Then there's the religious truth of spirituality and ethics and so on. In the 1400s was built a chapel dedicated to Thomas Aquinas. In it is the triumph of St. Thomas Aquinas over the heretics. Thomas Aquinas is depicted with a book with the Pauline inscription, "I will destroy the scholar's knowledge, the wisdom of the wise." He's stomping on a philosopher. The 3 women represent philosophy, grammar, and Socratic dialectics questioning. Europe was experiencing a renaissance, but then the Black Death came. Even the Black Plague couldn't stop the spread of mathematical science. The Byzantines, on the east side of the southern Muslim civilizations, were holding the Muslim Turks from sweeping through the Dark Ages Europe. The Byzantine Pope sent a Chrysoloras to Italy for help around 1397. But the Western Romans were more interested in seeing the Byzantines fall, because of so many conflicts between them throughout the Dark Ages. But Manuel Chrysoloras' Greek learning was a selling point for some. He taught in Florence, Venice, and Bologna. By the time Paolo del Pozzo Toscanelli and Cosimo de' Medici came around, the new humanism was in the air. The history here is complex and parallel. The historical figures of found and would like to share are Toscanelli, Brunelleschi and Cosimo de' Medici. Toscanelli and Filippo Brunelleschi were friends and were trying to make the Florence Cathedral. Toscanelli and Brunelleschi were going through old Roman ruins and monasteries, studying and digging out of the ruins all Greek and Roman literature they could find. Brunelleschi influenced the famous Renaissance perspective painting. Toscanelli led to the discovery of the Americas by Christopher Columbus. They both made the Florence Cathedral above. The Florence Cathedral has a unique octagon-sided dome, and Toscanelli and Brunelleschi figured out how to fit it on the round base. Brunelleschi was funded by Cosimo de' Medici. More on him later. Filippo Brunelleschi was influenced by Al-Hazen, or Ibn al-Haytham. Al-Haytham figured out that we don't see by light coming out of the eye, but by light going in. Brunelleschi generalized this to make perspective painting. He famously drew a perspective painting of a chapel, poked a hole in the painting's door, and had people look through it to see the real chapel. People couldn't tell the difference. Toscanelli met Gemistus Pletho, who himself had ties with Cosimo de' Medici. Gemistus got Toscanelli into the ancient Greek map maker Strabo. And then, the Byzantine Empire fell to the Muslim Turks in 1453. The Byzantine Empire fell because the Turks used the new cannon. This is a Dardanelles gun. It's actually built later in 1461. But the cannons that blasted down the walls of Constantinople were similarly big. After the Byzantine Empire fell, the Europeans needed another way to get to the riches of India and China. They first tried to go around Africa. They first ran into a navigation problem. The pole star goes below the horizon about midway of going down Africa. Then, one guy did and they decided that was too far. Toscanelli thought of going west to get to the east. He knew of the ancient Greek idea that the Earth was a sphere. And, with maps and data from Gemistus Pletho, he made a map of the Earth, and gave it to Christopher Columbus. The 14 through early 1500s were to see lots more science and technological revolutions. Johannes Gutenberg started working on his printing press around 1436. Within decades, the printing press was in every major town. Knowledge was democratized, an old medieval world of the troubadours traveling, spreading the latest news by music and poems became a thing of the past. Knowledge became democratized.